What are you doing? Huh? Are you going to go outside today? I see that you survived the windstorm last night. Yeah, and so did the house. Did you have fun dancing around in the wind? Okay, well, get some sleep. I know it's your nappy time. Well, it's not even winter yet, and winter is not playing fair. The worst thing we can have happen is two things. One, the ground freezes before it snows. Basically, we get temperatures in the single digits or low teens over a long period of time, and the ground will freeze. That's bad because then if we get rain, the rain freezes to the ground because the rain is just not warm enough to thaw out the dirt, and you get this. The second worst thing that we can have happen is what happened last night. We had extremely high winds. Well, let me back up. You people with tornadoes and hurricanes won't think that's funny. We had reasonably high winds. Somewheres in the neck of 30 to 40 mile an hour gusts last night. It's not crazy, but that without a good frozen ground and a snowpack makes the ground unstable. If we get a lot of rain and then we get a lot of wind, trees fall down. And when trees fall down, the power goes out. In our neck of the woods, you'll see that a lot of the roads are still dirt. And I guess if you didn't know what you were looking at, you could judge and say, oh, these people, these poor people, they're too poor to pave their roads. That couldn't be further from the truth. The truth is, paved roads are expensive. And they're expensive to make, but they're also more expensive to fix. And with this situation like's happening right now, where we have a freeze-thaw, 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 we have a very narrow window of time to stir up the dirt. And when we do that, the radiant warmth from the sun will actually come down and warm the earth. The ice is actually an insulator, and it will actually keep the ground frozen. And it will only make more ice because as the snow that's sitting on top melts and that moisture compacts, it makes worse and worse ice. But if we don't stir up the dirt right now, we'll be stuck with an ice slick for months. And as we proved last year, we went out, Alyssa and I, with the backhoe, and we tried to break up just the thinnest layer of ice on our driveway. No dice. Ice is an incredible force of nature. So by stirring up the dirt, we promote melting, which moves the water away, and we end up with a dry driveway. Because during the winter, we actually get quite a bit of sun, even though it's really cold. So it's not warm, but the radiant warmth will actually heat the driveway. The problem is, when you stir up the dirt, you tear up your driveway. So the reason we have dirt roads here is they're easier to maintain. We do a lot of damage to them in the winter by plowing them and sanding them and doing all this stuff, putting salt on them, all the things it takes to keep a road usable. And then in the spring, it's nothing to take a road grader, smooth the road out, and it's good all summer. And that's why a lot of this area is still dirt roads, not because we don't want to pave them. As many of our loyal followers already know, we recently attached our house to grid power. For the last 3 years and 3 winters, we have been living off grid, meaning we have solar, we have battery banks, and we have a generator. And it's a bit of a laugh because we have been completely immune to the power outages that have been affecting people in this area until now. And not only did we connect to grid power, but because of our circumstances, being that we lived in an RV and we've built this house and we need to get out of the RV and get in this house, we have, for the current time, made this house all electric. That means that we're not using any gas, we're not using any propane, no natural gas, we're not using any wood burning heat or anything right now. We have heat, we have hot water, we have lights. And pretty quick here, we'll have a few appliances hooked up, a washer, a dryer, and an electric oven, and that will put us in a good position to keep going on this project. The problem is, now we're extremely vulnerable. So the pendulum has swung completely the other way. We'll have all of our food in here. Heat is electric, our primary heat source, our primary hot water source. So basically, the basic functions of everyday life are electric. So we've got to have some sort of a backup plan. When we were milling the timber frame that has become our house, we were running out of power constantly. We had so many electronic devices that needed to work to make the construction site operate that we ran out of power. And we kind of reacted by purchasing a larger, louder, dirty generator that put out a ridiculous amount of energy. We never planned on using it long term because it's just obnoxious. The good news is we still have this generator, and it's going to be a fantastic backup generator for us. It's rated at 9,000 watts running, which is an important number. It also allows us to connect a 50 amp plug, which doesn't limit us on the current. A lot of battery backup or generator backup systems are on 30 amps, which is this little guy right here. And that would limit us to not 9,000 watts. This is all hypothetical. We can do the math, we can run the numbers, but the reality will be a test. So the heater that we're using in the house right now is an 8,000 watt heater. So in theory, that generator should have no problem keeping that heater running. But there's kind of a better part to that. We built what is proving to be a very energy efficient house. We're not even done sealing up the house yet. We still have a few projects left to go to really button it down. And already the heater that we're running is not running at full duty cycle. For every hour that it's on, it's probably off for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. Today it's extremely warm, 43 degrees, and the heater's only been on one time today. That means we're winning. We don't need a ton of heat, and I think that's a big factor. We installed this on-demand water heater, which is going to bite us in the butt when it comes to a power outage because it basically has no reserve. Where a tank system would probably be our friend because at least you could heat the tank of water up, and then once the water ran out, well, you'll have to stop and let it recover. Of course, this is why so many people don't do this. They use gas, propane, etc., things that don't go out in theory. What we're hoping is that because this water heater is 3 elements, each one of them is 8,000 watts, and that's not their running watts, that's their max rated watts. We're hoping that if we have a long-term power outage, that we won't have a problem keeping one element going. We won't be able to run that heater and the water heater at the same time. But in truth, we lived off grid for so long, we have become very proficient about conserving energy and conserving power. So it might be something where we hold all of the dishes until the end of the day, and then we wash all the dishes all at once, and we only use one element. We're not going to get max flow and max temperature, but it should be enough to keep us running or functioning until the power comes back. So unless you're super savvy, you're probably thinking to yourself, how the heck do you set up a generator backup? Well, we're going to be doing it kind of a rudimentary way. And of course, there are entire whole house systems that you can use to do this same task. But we're going to set it up so that we can simply plug the generator in or unplug it and store the generator so it's not subject to weather. The basic components of the system is this piece, which is a really critical component called an interlock. And this is actually mated to the electrical panel. It is specified in the instructions that it will fit very specific electrical panels. And it also fits very specific breakers. So this is a matched part to our power panel. This component keeps both grid power and generator power from being on simultaneously. It's a massive safety feature. This keeps both utility power from coming out of the cord when it's live, and also keeps us from backfeeding the grid with generator power when we turn the generator on. Because our generator is capable of 9,000 watts and it has a 50 amp cord, we're going to use a 50 amp breaker on the panel. And we're going to be using an 8/4 cord. We also purchased an outdoor rated cord end. We'll need to get that assembled, put all this together, and when we're all done, we should give it a test and see if the generator will run the house. Send text message to my bestest friend.
What do you want to say?
Hey love, I need to turn the power off for a second. Are we good with that?
Ready to send it?
Yeah. Read text message from my bestest friend.
Yes. Told you I was running on battery. Would you like to reply?
Awesome. I think I'm getting shot at right now.
Ready to send it?
Yeah. I don't know who that is, guys, and I don't know what I did to make him mad, but I'm a little nervous. Let's turn the water heater off, the bathroom, the garage heat. Let's turn the bathroom off, and we'll turn the garage outlet off. That's my neutral and my ground bus. And then I'm gonna have two hots on that side of the wire. Just hoping this will fit through a 3/4. Maybe not. I'm gonna go with no. Well, that sucks. So we'll strip back to there. All right, that's it. I just got that all done, and I realized that I'm pretty sure we put the interlock in the wrong place after all that work, because this main breaker, that's not the grid power, that's the house. If we turn the power off there, that only turns the house off. That doesn't turn the grid off. It's the breaker out at the pedestal. Holy smokes, how did the electrician look this over? I looked it over. I just went through all the work of putting this together, and none of us realized that we were interlocking the wrong thing. What? I don't even know what to say. That's so ridiculous. So if we interlock this, if we turn this off, then all the generator is doing is back feeding the grid. Or I guess it's feeding this panel, but the grid power comes up into here, and this panel is hot all the time, as long as the grid power is turned on at the pedestal. And this is actually the main breaker for the sub panel that's in the house. So interlocking this does nothing. All right, knowing what I know now, I'm taking that out. I'm just gonna pull that out right now so I can get the power turned back on to the house. And then maybe let's go take a look at the pedestal and I'll show you what I'm talking about. And I guess I'll try to get back with the electrician, because I'm really glad my brain clicked for just a second there and I realized what I was doing, because holy cow, that would have been very bad and exciting. Let's get this all turned back on so Alyssa can have internet and you guys can have videos. We'll turn all those on. All right, and we'll turn this back on. So the thing is, guys, this is what we need to lock out. And I'm guessing that this is not generator ready. So after a wonderful conversation with the electrician, I'm starting to wonder if this is gonna actually be a whole lot more difficult. Maybe there's an interlock for this. Maybe we can put a 50 and put a generator cord in here and have a generator sitting out here. I mean, that would be actually a little bit more desirable for noise, but would suck to have to put gas in the generator clear out here. But this is the grid disconnect, and I can't believe how insanely close we came to just hooking the generator to the grid. It looks like the lights are back on in the house, back on in the RV. Everything's working again. You're not gonna believe what almost just happened.
I don't know if I want to know. It's probably bad.
It's bad. So that's not at all, and I came this close. That is not at all how you do a generator disconnect on this house. And I literally had it completely wired up, and I was putting the plate back on, and I'm like, are you serious right now? Like, it doesn't work at all. Guys, I almost died. Like, for real. Uh-oh. Well, guys, I took a break from this project because I freaked myself out. I consider myself fairly attentive, and I try to think through what I'm doing. I don't really transfer responsibility to somebody else. I don't point fingers and blame them. I take personal responsibility for this project and the things that we're doing. I freaked myself out though, because I kind of let myself get really far into that project, and I can't believe that happened. The good news is nothing happened, but I needed some time to really stop and reflect on, I don't know, myself, I guess. After thinking about it for quite a while, I've realized that I think what happened is the electrician probably looked at the panel with me, and it was an honest mistake where the panel should be wired the other way. It's wired backwards, for lack of a better word. I mean, technically you could wire it either way, but for our application, it's actually wrong, because the breaker at the top should actually be where the grid power is coming into the panel, and the bus and the lugs should be protected by the breaker. But instead, the grid power is coming into the bus at the bottom, and the breaker is only protecting the house. Therefore, the interlock doesn't work. I'm gonna have to talk to an electrician, because that won't work. The only other option would be to put the generator clear out of the pedestal, and I'm not sure that that would be advantageous. So we'll get to the bottom of that with him and see if there's some way we can rectify this situation, which I'm hoping either involves switching the breaker, moving the guts around, relocating the cables, I don't know. What I did realize last night is that this will work. This will work in a pinch. All we have to do is make sure that the pedestal breaker is off. That way there's no chance that we're gonna backfeed the grid through this generator breaker. But there's also another big factor. This is a male plug, and if we don't turn off the grid power at the pedestal and we do turn on the breaker at the panel for the generator, these spades or whatever become hot. And I don't think I need to tell you guys how dangerous that would be to have a 50 amp exposed cable. So for now, as in for the next couple of days, we're going to wire this up, and I'm going to put this cord on, and we're going to tape over the breaker so that nobody can turn that breaker on, because we may get a power outage. And I want to test this to make sure that it will in fact work, everything's functioning. So if we do get a power outage, we're good to go. We're heading into the holiday season right now, and getting anything done is going to become impossible. People are just taking time off, which we totally support. It just makes things tough. And what I did not want to happen is to go into the holidays vulnerable to a power outage, because if we lose power, we're toast. Which really sucks. I don't like it, but it's part of this journey, it's part of this process. We have to be here right now, but that doesn't mean we have to be victims. I say we test this whole thing out and see if this generator will power our house. Am I okay to turn the power off? Yeah. Okay. All right, everything's back together. While I'm here, let me just show you what I'm talking about. So these three lugs here, these are the grid power, and they're coming in the bottom of this panel. So these hots are feeding these lugs, and then they feed this breaker. The problem is the breaker is not protecting this panel. It's not protecting these lugs. These hots and this neutral are actually feeding the house. So this breaker is only protecting the house. And so the problem is, if I turn the grid power on and I turn this breaker on, this hot is actually coming out that cord, and we've got ourselves a big problem. So I'm hoping that something can be done, and I don't even know what. Maybe this breaker can actually move down. It looks like this panel is kind of like mirrored, if that makes sense. The only problem I see with that is the cover only has one spot for a main. And I see that they left, when they wired this up, they left just a little bit of extra cable here, but it's nowhere near enough to get up on top of this breaker. I guess this neutral's fine, because it's just feeding a neutral bus, and it doesn't actually even get disconnected. The problem is these two hots are not protected by that breaker. So the interlock is gonna have to stay off, and we've got to make certain that this is off when the grid power is turned on. Otherwise, we've got a safety hazard. And again, I'm only doing this as a temporary solution until we can figure out how to fix this. In case we get a power outage, we can come out here, turn the grid power off, turn this on, and backfeed the house with the generator. All right, this is off and our house is on. So let's turn the generator on, and then we can power this breaker on, and we'll see if we can feed the house. Turn this breaker off for now. All right, I think we're close to ready. Let's turn that on. Okay, so here's the plan. It's gonna get really loud, so I'm not gonna be able to talk. I'm gonna start the generator, then we're going to flip the breaker on the generator to turn it on, the power, and then we're gonna flip the breaker on this panel out here, which will backfeed this panel. We know that the breaker at the pedestal is turned off, the main for the house is turned on, and then we'll go inside and see how it's working. All right, let's turn on the garage outlet east. This should turn the garage lights on. And let's turn on the garage bath. For this test, I'm just gonna turn this little heater all the way off. Not sure you guys can see that, maybe you can, but this generator is what we call a dirty generator. And the LED lights are sensitive enough that there's actually a cycle there. You can see them flickering. And let's turn these on. Bath fan on. All right. So let's try the tough one. Here's the difficult one. Let's turn the heater on. Oh, forgot to turn the breaker on. Hold on. Garage heat. Okay, let's try that again. Oof, that's making the generator work. Lights are flickering a whole bunch now. It's putting out heat. Let's just agree on that. I think what's clear to me is that this is strictly for emergency use. This is not something we want to be doing every day. It's not too loud out there, the generator, but it's definitely there. So while that's kind of running, I just want to let it run for a minute and just kind of see like if it takes a dive or if the breaker on the generator flips or something else. You know, I think we've got 8,000 watts on the heater, and then the lights, they're probably pushing 1,000 watts. No, maybe 500 watts of lights in here. So that's pushing the max running watts of that generator for sure. The good news is when it's fairly temperate outside, like above freezing, 30 degrees or so, the heater's not on a lot. This house we built for efficiency, so that's good news. I'll take a minute right now and explain why we're not using wood heat, even though we have a ton of wood. First of all, we're gonna have to cut a hole for the chimney. So we're cutting a hole in the house that we don't need. Second of all, it's a combustion heat, so we've got to bring oxygen from somewhere. Most wood stoves in older homes get the oxygen from the living environment. So the irony is that all the air going out your chimney is equal to air, cold air coming in. So it's a bit of an irony because you're heating all this air that you're then pumping out the chimney, and then you're sucking in really cold air behind it to fill the living space with breathing air. So it's not very efficient, which is why a lot of older wood heat homes are actually really cold, even though they have a lot of heat. They're very drafty. And you have to have drafty because if you don't, you're gonna suffocate. So a lot of modern wood stoves actually use a breather hole, and they actually get their intake from outside. They cut another hole in the wall to bring air in that the wood stove can use to burn, combust, and then they exhaust it through the chimney, but all the heat that is being produced by the wood stove stays in the house. That's way more efficient. But we don't really want to go cutting all those holes in the walls because we don't think long-term we'll be using any kind of wood heat in the house. The plan is still and has always been to use a wood boiler outside and heat the radiant system that we've built inside, which is a closed loop system and requires no combustion. There's no bringing outside air in and drafting the house and making it feel colder. I wanted to address that because a lot of people have asked that question, like, you have all that wood, why aren't you putting a wood stove in? That's why. All right, this has been running for probably 3 minutes or so, and I'd say that's enough to verify that it works. Let's let that heater cool off for a second, and then we're gonna do the true test, which is the water heater. So this water heater on one element is equal to the heat provided from the garage heater. The thing is, this water heater has 3 elements. There's no way we're gonna create this amount of current from the generator. We know that. But there's a good chance that we can get 1. We have to have 1 breaker on to even get the water heater to work because it controls the brain on the unit. I did some research on the internet from this company, and I also did my own research. The way this water heater is wired is in series. The way this works is water comes in here, and there's a sensor, a flow sensor, and then there's a thermometer, or a thermistor, I believe is what it's called, that determines the amount of voltage or current actually that goes to each element. What it does is it turns on the first element completely. This element here will be turned on, and the water will be heated in this chamber. And if it's not warm enough, it adds current from this element, and if it's still not warm enough, it adds current from this element. So they go in series. This goes to 100%, then this one turns on, this goes to 100%, then this turns on. The nice thing about that is we can actually just run one element and we'll just get whatever heat this one element will produce. To help me understand what this means, I put a non-contact or a contactless power meter on here, and I ran one faucet and I looped it around this wire, and I could see that there was about 30 amps of current coming through this one wire. And then I had Alyssa turn on 2 sinks because there was no current coming through these 2. But with 2 sinks, both of these had about 30 amps. And then I had her turn on the shower, and that brought all 3 of these elements on full blast. So we've got one water heater element turned on, and let's go turn the water on and see what happens. So when I turn this water on, the water heater is going to sense flow and turn on, and let's see what happens. Well, it's working, and you can see the lights flickering again, so it's definitely struggling. We're getting, I'm going to go with about 90 degree water coming out of there. Oh no, it's hotter than that. That's probably 105 or more. Water's not here just yet. So out of curiosity, I'm just going to lighten that load a little bit, and we'll just turn one of these on. Oof, that one's even more sensitive. All right, we've got hot water. This is not going to burn you, but it's definitely not cold water either. And the flickering should stop. Ish. Probably the most crucial test is showers. Can we get enough hot water here to take a shower? We know that this guy flows a lot more water. Boy, the generator's struggling now. That water's definitely hot. That's very hot. Oof. Okay, man. So I think my conclusion with this is, yes, this works, but be conservative and only in a pinch. Don't do this any longer than you have to. So short showers, only run the heat if you need to, and otherwise just kind of minimize the load on the system. Well, it passes the test. But I will say that that generator is definitely working hard out there. So what are we going to get for runtime? A couple of hours at that load, right? It's not going to be great. But with the heater only working part of the time, of course, like I've mentioned, I don't know how many times, we still have a lot of air sealing left to do. We can get this house more efficient. We can get it tighter. I know we can. And I'm hoping that that heater is going to run even less. Of course, down the road, we'll get the radiant hooked up, and we'll kind of have to see what happens with that. That's a whole different test. But in a pinch, this works. I have to say one thing. The downside of this generator, which is one of the reasons that we just don't use it, and we didn't use it when we were still off grid before we actually used grid power, is it is running full blast all the time, which is part of how it's able to generate so much current for starting purposes. We do have a small inverter generator that's a Honda. That was our main power source for 3 years. And it would actually run quite a bit of this stuff. It would run the lights here, and it would run the refrigerator, and probably the bath fan and stuff like that. So I guess if we needed to sip fuel, you know, for hours and hours and hours, and we didn't need a lot of power, it probably would be more efficient to run that than this big fish generator. All right, let's make sure this breaker is off. Good. All right, and power's going back on.